Welcome, everyone, to the first ever retrospective review series on the Bored and Annoyed YouTube channel. I am joined with Paul from Tales from the Flipside today. How's it going, Paul?
Going well.
I have twisted Paul's arm into watching the Friday the 13th movies, which I guess, Paul, let's start by what's your history with these series? Have you seen them all? Have you seen a few of them? Any history at all?
No, the last October was the first time I even saw the first one in its entirety. And up until then, I just knew who Jason was and snippets of, slasher flicks here and there. So really no history. So I thought it was good. Now that I've watched it and engaged in it, I'll get on board. How many movies are there right now? How many am I in for?
So Jason's series on his own, I want to say there are 10. And then there's a remake and there's Freddy versus Jason.
Okay.
So depending on how deep we want to dive into this, we're planning on releasing these as we go. Actually, perfect timing for this. We had already been talking about this, and Shudder, the horror streaming service, just this month released the first 8. So basically there were 8 originals. New Line Cinema bought the franchise. They made Jason Goes to Hell and Jason X, and then they owned Freddy Krueger. So they made Freddy versus Jason. So that's the series. Now, my history with this is I'm a Freddy Krueger guy personally. I like Freddy way better. I have probably seen all of these at one point or another. Jason never interested me much. He's a little different from Freddy Krueger because he's not pure evil, right? He's got kind of a reason for being, or a reason for acting the way that he does. Now, the movie we're talking about today is the 1980 original Friday the 13th, directed by Sean Cunningham. And this one, surprisingly enough, is not really a Jason movie. Jason has a part in the plot, but it is about, the killer is Pamela Voorhees. And this is going to be laced with spoilers, by the way. So if you've never seen Friday the 13th, don't know who Jason is, it's going to be ruined here for you. But essentially the plot being, in 1958, there was a murder of a couple of camp counselors who were up, about to have sex. And a couple other tragedies took place like 20 or so years before the movie takes place. And essentially they are reopening Camp Crystal Lake, which has kind of been shuttered since that tragedy took place. Now, there's also the legend of a little boy who drowned in the lake prior to this happening because the counselors weren't paying attention. And the movie kind of opens with all the counselors are opening up Camp Crystal Lake, and one by one they all get killed in a various different kinds of ways. So is that a decent plot synopsis, you think?
Yeah, I'm more fresh on the second movie. But for the first one for tonight, what was the history of those previous murders? Is that later to be revealed that it is still Mrs. Voorhees, or how did that play out?
Yeah, so essentially, Pamela Voorhees, through the trauma of losing Jason because of these camp counselors, she murdered a couple of counselors, and essentially hasn't been doing much for the last 20 years because the campground hasn't been open, right? She's got nothing to do. Essentially, I think her goal is kind of to make them pay and essentially make it so this won't happen to anyone else, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So,
okay.
Yeah.
I thought that this was her first murder streak after losing her son because she was mad they were reopening the camp.
Yeah, but I think she killed. So the movie opens with 1958. It's 2 camp counselors like ready to have sex, and they get killed, right? That's the opening. The camp closes since then. And when it reopens, Pamela Voorhees is still out there. If anybody wants to correct us, go ahead and leave a comment or whatever. I'm not, an expert on this series at all, but some of the things I liked, I guess, I do like the deaths in this.
Yeah,
Uh,
they were good.
yeah, so all the deaths are pretty much up until the end. The kills are all done from like a POV perspective. Is that right? Like when you see when someone is like most of the time when the bad guy is on the screen, you're actually just seeing through her vision,
Yeah,
correct?
that was one of the draws to the movie is, who is it? And you're seeing this through their eyes,
Right.
them sneaking up on people or
Right.
whatever.
And I wonder how well that would work today in a movie, you know?
I don't know. How did the reboot do?
Well, the reboot's not like that. Now the reboot is it skips the whole Pamela Voorhees thing. It
Okay.
goes straight into Jason. And I believe as we get into these, they become more standard, you're not in the point of view of whoever the killer is anymore, because beyond part 2, we all kind of know, right?
I mean, I think if they redid it today with any movie through the eyes of the serial killer, I think it'd be neat. I mean, it could be considered something fresh for the market, I guess.
Yeah, and I suppose it does give you that, obviously we're a little bit more desensitized than they were back in 1980 when this came out, but I can imagine people kind of, clutching at their armrests like, she's coming, watch out, or whatever, so it does give you that. But we've got 10 kills in this. Interestingly, only 5 or 6 of them are actually on screen. A lot of the stuff in this is characters coming across the corpses of people who were killed off screen. This is one of Kevin Bacon's earlier roles.
Yeah.
And he probably gets my favorite death. He's just finished sleeping with Marcy, another counselor at the camp. And they've actually got a dead body on the bunk above them. And basically, they finish having sex. Marcy leaves the room. Blood starts to drip out of the mattress that's above him onto his face. And then whoever the killer is grabs him by the face from under the bed and shoves an arrow up through his neck. And just that's something that I feel like is missing today. I feel like the kills just aren't ever as gruesome in that almost cartoony kind of way as they were back when, Tom Savini did the effects for this. He did like the original Dawn of the Dead and, Day of the Dead and that kind of stuff where it's actually practical.
Yeah. That's the best kind. You can't, CGI and whatever else just doesn't do it.
No.
The movie, The Thing, it's all practical and it's superb.
But yeah, there's that's a good one. You've got the character who is found hanging from a door with like arrows sticking all out of him. He's got let's see, I'm looking at the kill list here. His name's Bill. He's got his throat slashed with a hunting knife. He's impaled through multiple places with arrows. So one funny thing about this though is like Pamela Voorhees killed all these people. That's one strong woman.
Yeah, she's been working out.
Yes. And I like when she shows up. And you'll notice we don't have much to say about this movie because the plot is very bare bones. She shows up at the end and she's got her sweater on and she's unassuming. She pulls up in a Jeep. Oh, I'm Pamela Voorhees, dear, or whatever. And it's like, when she starts fighting with the main girl, and I forget her name. I want to say her name is Alice, actually. She kind of gets into a fight with Pamela Voorhees, and it's real cheesy. I'm left wondering how Pamela dealt with all these other people. Yeah. Although there is one scene in particular I like where if you didn't know who the killer was, and Paul, did you watch this with the experience of not knowing who the killer was, or did you think it was Jason?
No, I thought it was Jason, and I was like, man, I never knew that it was his mom in the first one. I don't know, I hadn't watched it that closely or seen the whole thing for that matter.
It's funny too, because it's like you wonder when they were making these how. I know Sean Cunningham basically called up the writer of this and said, hey, Halloween crushed it. Let's rip off Halloween. That's how it all started. Now, I don't think this is nearly as good as Halloween, but yeah, you wonder if the plan was for there to be like a franchise. I mean,
Yeah,
they
they
set
wrote
it up pretty nicely.
They set it up as a good one-off too.
Right.
You know, that's it. In the end, Mrs. Voorhees is killed, and then was it a dream sequence, that last canoe scene,
Right.
or not? So they could have or could have not continued it on for another 9 movies.
Yeah, they had the sting at the end of, oh, is he out there? Right.
Right.
But yeah, when they're fighting, it's like, oh man, this is so funny to have to write a script where the killer is this unassuming old woman, and you watch it and she's kind of nuts, but you kind of get it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's like I don't know. Your voice earlier reminded me of Mrs. Doubtfire, like unassuming. Yeah. But I think why she wasn't so strong in that final fight, at least at the beginning, is because she was revealing her own personal tragedy. I think that weakened her versus I'm only here to strictly kill you versus I'm going to give my villain speech kind of thing.
Right. Yep. And I do like too how like she's clearly known by the the town, because there's one scene where the cop or whatever shows back up and you're seeing it through Mrs. Voorhees' eyes, and she kind of walks up to him and he's like, "Hey, what are you doing out here?"
Yeah.
And then he gets stabbed, Yeah. So like she was able, because of her unassuming nature and the way she looked, to kind of creep up on people, or just be completely, nobody's going to say, "Oh, I guess this old lady's coming, I better run."
Yeah, right? Exactly. Yeah.
But yeah, the movie, the ending's pretty neat. She gets her head chopped off. And essentially the hero character, the final girl, so to speak, she jumps in a canoe to take a nap, I think. Which I don't really understand, but she gets in a canoe, takes a nap. The cops show up. But she's out in the middle of the lake on a canoe. She wakes up, and a little boy, Jason, mongoloid looking guy, jumps out of the water, takes her down. She wakes up in a hospital bed. Was it a dream? Was it not?
Right. So yeah, I think she just passed out in the canoe after killing Mrs. Voorhees, which I wouldn't be tired after that. But anyway, but I didn't know the history of Jason, the character himself. I didn't know that he was mentally deformed or whatever issues he has. And so, he probably wasn't a great swimmer. That's why he drowned. But yeah, I have some other stuff in regards to his history I'll save for the next movie.
Okay, nice. Yeah, and I don't know the release schedule of this yet. I'm thinking Sundays. So tune in, subscribe, make sure you get them all. The last thing I do want to talk about, though, is I really like the score, the music in these. It almost sounds like the score for Jaws. Like, it reminds me of that foreboding dude, like, and the stuff is great.
A lot of movies for me, I know in our other movie reviews, you guys have talked about the soundtrack and it just kind of blows by me. But this one, it really is part of the story, like Jaws.
Yeah, I think that in this genre in particular, and I guess if you want to call Jaws horror, it's fair, I would say. I think that music is key to kind of drumming up that emotional reaction from an audience. I mean, this movie doesn't necessarily use the sound effects for jump scares like some of the newer bad horror does, I would say, but it does have a score that's really well written. You can tell that they really gave a shit, whoever wrote the score for this. It's unique. And that, I mean, when you have something legendary like the whole you did something right. So what kind of grade would you give this movie?
I think it's meant to be at the time a good B horror movie. I mean, they were trying to follow up Halloween. They probably weren't expecting to get a big hit and let it be, have it grow into some cult classic, let alone get 9 more films. So I think it's a good B plus. B plus movie for what it is, what we know now. At the time, if I was just watching in the theater, I don't know, maybe just a straight B or maybe even higher because of the time and what it was doing in just as the culture.
Yeah, I think that had I have seen this back in the day, I would have loved it. You
Yeah.
know, it's it's like there's so many examples of genre films in every genre. Whether it's like Star Wars and science fiction or fantasy or whatever, where it's like they had to build on things that existed before them, and make better versions of them. And I certainly think that has happened with this movie. I'm assuming as we get farther through this, they'll get more interesting. If I remember correctly, and I don't know which one it is, but there's one where he battles like a clairvoyant who can like move objects with her mind or something. So that's when it starts to get, I think, a little bit more on the fun side. But yeah, I'd agree with you. I'm going to give this a B. I still think it's an enjoyable movie to watch today. It's not the greatest thing ever. If you showed it to someone who didn't care at all for movies or whatever, they might think that they might not understand what makes it good, but whatever. I still think it's good. But yeah, any final thoughts or thoughts about what you expect from the rest of the series, I guess?
I mean, who's going to be, is how, I don't know, because I already know, I guess, but I trying to erase what I know from my mind as far as number 2. Is it going to be, who's going to be the murderer? Was that a dream sequence? Is it going to be Jason? Is it the woman who survived? Did she lose her mind and now she's a murderer for some reason?
Okay. Now we all know it's Jason. He's,
right. If you had no idea, if you said, we're going to make a number 2.
Yeah. Yeah. So if I had no idea, I would assume it's somehow going to be Jason. Now, what do I expect moving forward from Jason movies? I expect some of them to be more serious than others. I expect a few of them to be ungodly terrible, I would say, like borderline unwatchable. But I'm hoping that they're bad in that way where it almost loops around on itself and it becomes entertaining, right?
Yeah, I mean, after watching number 2, I have some questions for number 3 and / hopes. So I think it's I'll save it for number 2. But I'm enjoying it so far. So we'll see when I go last cut of the dead on it. But
okay. Yeah, no, you better not. You better not leave me alone with this. But anyway, I have been Jackson, and Paul, where can we find you?
Yeah, I'm on a podcast, Tales from the Flipside, which is under the CBSI comicbookinvest.com brand. We're live Monday nights about 9:30, and we just kind of shoot the breeze about what we picked up comic and collectible wise, and it's kind of like hanging out with the guys at the bar. So tune in if you can.
Sweet. And I am Jackson with Bored and Annoyed, but you're here, so you know where to find me. Thank you so much. And make sure you subscribe and tune in for part 2.